Time now for our rants and raves, starting with Dan Kennedy.
I have a rave for the media reform organization Free Press, which has been a real leader in the fight to preserve net neutrality. Now, big loss this week with the FCC voting to revoke net neutrality, but Free Press is still at it. They're joining a lawsuit against the FCC. They're urging Congress to pass a law to bring back net neutrality. I should disclose that I think I've probably given them a donation at some point in the past, but they do good work. They're working for important First Amendment rights in the 21st century.
All right, good. Jennifer.
My rave is for Senator John McCain this week, who tweeted calling out our president for overusing and misusing the term fake news. And he pointed out in his tweet that, you know, it's perfectly fine to criticize media bias where it exists, but to call legitimate news organizations fake news is just giving cover to despots around the world who actually do jail reporters for what they regard as fake news. And it's unbecoming of the president, to say the least.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. We've had a discussion here that we all need to stop even using the term.
Yes.
I mean, just put it aside.
Right.
You know. Kelly.
I am heralding, so I'm raving about Monica Drake being elevated to assistant managing editor of the New York Times, which may not seem like much to people listening, but that means she's the first black woman on the masthead of the New York Times, which is a big deal. They made the announcement. She had been the travel editor, but then that sounds like all she did was, you know, small travel stories. But no, she did all kinds of interesting things, particularly working on the global and the digital platform. And even when she starts under this gig, she's going to do something called surfacing, a cross-platform column that will focus on subcultures around the world. So she's brought a lot of other voices to the table in that role as travel editor. It's a big deal for her to go to the masthead.
What's the
to
title
be
again?
Assistant managing editor.
Oh.
Pretty big.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
good for her.
Yeah.
Carly.
I have a rave for WGBH contributor David S. Bernstein.
Oh, yeah.
He's got a piece that is in The Atlantic this week. It's David's been writing for years about gun violence in very interesting ways and counterintuitive ways. This one's a piece about the hidden costs of people who are shot but survive. So we know a lot about people who are shot and killed, lots of stats around that, not much being gathered around people who are shot and are survivors of that. There's long-term costs. It's a really smart piece with a national focus. Would love to see somebody around here publishing David in print so we can get on that.
Maybe the Herald can pick it up.
That would be fun.
All right, well, I have a rave tonight, but I'm actually going to make it a participatory rave or rant, however you would like to come down on this. And it has to do with the Boston Globe's racism series this week. I'm giving it a rave with a few caveats. And my first caveat was, especially in the first piece, it was too anecdotal for me. And in general, I thought it was too divided between black and white as opposed to a more multicultural look at racism in the city. But the piece that I really liked the most happens to have been the sports one, because I thought the way I was drawn into it, it was beyond anecdotal. It was perspective, because it said, now we know. It's like if something like this happened in Detroit, it wouldn't be the kind of news that it is here, because of the history of Boston. And they put that history in perspective, which made you kind of nod throughout the piece. So I thought that one in particular was good. But I mean, I didn't read every single word of every single piece. I certainly got a flavor. And I happen to know everybody in the city was talking about it. And everywhere I went, from doctors' offices to my paddle tennis club or whatever, it provoked discussion.
I've read every single word of every single piece. I give it a rave. Some of it left me a little cold, but some of it's been excellent. The sports piece, as you mentioned, was very good. I really like the one on colleges and universities, and it pointed out a significant problem, which is that the universities in this town have been reluctant to take on African American students. The needle hasn't budged for years. Meanwhile, they bring in international students who pay full tuition, and they're able to say, "Oh, look at we're very diverse. We have a diverse."
One more person to weigh in.
body."
I'm going to call in Callie.
All right. I would give it a rave overall. I did like the first piece because there's data there, and I get so tired of saying, see, this is what I'm saying. And so Akila had all of the numbers there. You go anywhere, you don't see anybody everybody why. Here's what's going on. I also appreciated the leadership one because it's a huge issue, and it'll move all the other sectors if there were leadership. I agree with you about I would love to have seen a more spread across cultural, around multi-race look at this as well, because we're in the 21st
One controversial
century.
thing is that I think a lot of people would have loved to see this before the election.
Well,
Yes.
yeah.
Right, final word.
Yeah.
Why? Because journalism is
Rant
supposed
or
to
rave?
push the results of an election?
It might have been nice to talk about that before we had
I mean,
before
that suggestion is
referendum on
revealing in
Marty
and of
Walsh's first term.
itself.
All right.
Yeah,
Rant or rave?
I give it a rant. I thought a lot of it was stuff we already know, and a lot of it was too anecdotal.
All right, gotta
and-
go.
Too bad.
Thanks for that, Jennifer.